This is The Future of Money, a podcast where we hope to educate and get educated about the new world of blockchain and digital money. And my name is Eric Den Boer, and I will be your host. Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Blockchain and the Future of Money. Today, for you guys, we have something special going on. We're going to be talking about AIs, and I know AIs is really something else on everybody's lips. So today we're going to talk about AI and security. And with me, like always, we have the beautiful Lee with me from KUAF, and we have Zach, a very good friend of mine. So before we start, please introduce yourself.
Okay. My name is Lee Wood. I'm the general manager of KUAF. I know nothing about AI. That's going to be my first thing to say.
Really interesting. Zach?
Okay. My name is Zach Morse. I'm a Bentonville native here, born and raised. I've been at Walmart for about 12 years or so and lived many lives inside of that space, but largely on the security side of life.
Oh, he's a native.
Yeah. So you know a lot.
I've seen a lot of transition, we'll just say.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, let's dive right into it. So let's talk about some key challenges in all of this. Actually, you know what? Let's start in the right end. We did read an article about some people were concerned about, I think you mentioned it.
I did. Well, it was the first thing I read this morning on NPR's app is that, and you'll tell that I skimmed it, that there's a letter that's been drafted by some leaders in the industry, sort of, back to other industry folks saying, why don't we just slow down a little bit in the development of AI. And then you were saying really so that we can build a standard is kind of the reasoning that they're saying.
Yes.
Okay.
It was more like take it back a step and let everybody in the industry sit down and make some standards or security features. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was really interesting because this is exactly what we're going to be talking about today. You read the article too, didn't you?
Yeah, I did a similar skim last night and saw it and dove into it a bit this morning. And immediately, of course, it sounds somewhat practical. I would say at the rate of speed of transition. Mm-hmm. After a couple of years of paradigm shifts, we seem to be faced with yet another one that has some pretty vast implications.
Yeah.
I know that you work with security. So from that point, how do you think we should go forward? I know that's a very...
Well, right. It's kind of twofold. From a security perspective, we are often in the position of being behind the curve of whatever is leading, and then we go through a process of observation, understanding where the risks are and trying to mitigate those risks the best way we can, the most appropriate way for any given company. Mm-hmm. What those boundaries are and what those controls are that are necessary are going to vary widely.
Yeah. For
some, this new AI layer may or may not even affect them at all.
So
right?
Can I ask that question?
Sure.
What specific security concerns are there for AI? Are they different than other security concerns for networks or, payment platforms?
Sure.
Or are they similar?
I think it's there are some. Anytime there's technology function, there is equal security function consideration that's inside that space, right? AI at a commoditized level is such a novel concept right now that, the ability to leverage it for yourself from a security practitioner side is still, it just hasn't been around long enough for it to take shape, though
Right.
There is definitely communities who are wanting to say, hey, this is actually the time that we might be able to catch up, right? If we can harness the magic for ourselves, could we leverage tooling that helps take some of we'll say all the in-between steps of the research and recording and timelining and some of the things that take you away from really diving into a case perhaps from like an incident responder perspective. There's a lot of, in this case, regardless of what the usage is, the dots between point A and point B have just gotten a lot shorter.
Yep.
Yeah.
Through essentially AI, like force multiplier, right? It's what do you know? What do you need to do? Yep. How many tasks are there? how many of those things do you maybe not have to do manually anymore?
Yeah, actually, I read an article just yesterday about that, and they said that in half the time of anything you did, you can get 20 to 30 better equity or quality of the output that you put in. So in the old, yeah, I
But
know
that's
that
why
makes-
it's ironic that there's this thing that's saying slow down, because it almost feels like I guess you could have to do it purposefully. You can slow down, but can you really? I mean, that's the whole point of this, is that it
Are we
accelerates.
still talking about their proposal? I don't think you can slow it down, but what you need to do is you need to look at the aspect of, how can we secure this
Yes.
in a way,
Yeah.
right? I'll make an example here because this is where I read that in that article, was that when it comes to smart contracts, for instance, right? You can now have an AI write a smart contract in half the time with 20 to 30% better quality than someone that sits there and write that by hand. That means that you can now produce more smart contracts. Is that a bad thing or is it a good thing? The good thing is that you can write smart contract much faster, but someone can also go in and say, hey, can you find flaws in these already existing smart contracts that I can utilize?
Oh yeah.
Right?
Right. And I mean, what you're talking about is essentially like a vulnerability.
Yes.
Right. And then you get a observation of that vulnerability, and then you have some kind of potential broadcast or communication of that vulnerability. And then there's a window of time before we see action on that vulnerability, see it in the wild, so to speak. I mean, I think we're already seeing it, but the trend to anticipate is that any sort of flaws, especially through like just general security research broadcasts, there's going to be much faster actionalization on those, right? There's going to be tools that are ready to take in that new vuln, add it to the library, and then sweep.
Execute something on
So
it. Yeah.
this has been a space actually that has been an emphasis for the last couple of years in particular, where the vulnerability space, right, just the cracks between the cracks, is where a lot of emphasis of companies trying to shore up their process to be faster, just across the board and generally to identify, manage, and be faster, because it will be necessary to be able to observe and act on patching those things as fast as possible.
Yeah.
There's a whole life cycle there, right? And that really goes straight from a whole company to patching your Chrome browser at home when you see it telling you to update.
Yeah.
Patching your, not kicking off the, I'll do this later on my phone or on my laptop, because it'll become a little more paramount that you want that window to be as short as possible.
And in that way, I mean, that I'm going to slide over to the next end. So how we can enhance cybersecurity. And one way to do that in the future might be that you have an AI actually that's connected, that you have yourself kind of programmed on your computer, that will do all of those updates and take care of security risks and will look for malware, because it will become a personal. I really like the thing. I read this article from Bill Gates where he said that, we are now going into the age of where it will literally become your co-pilot, right? There's you will in the end have this AI that you write the specifics for, and then that AI is going to be writing along with you on these things that you might need in the future. It could be medical needs. It could be. I mean, we can get into it, but yeah, the enhancement of the cybersecurity. I absolutely agree with you.
Well, it's also an interesting space where, again, we rarely get a chance to catch up.
Yeah,
in like any kind of practical way. Huge developments like this that are suddenly on everyone's doorstep, and now it's a matter of, are you even aware of it, right? 2, do you even know a pathway to leverage it for yourself and learn it and get up to speed, I'll just say. And 3, do you find any sort of like practical implementation, whether that be a personal life process or a professional process, all of which I think very few people will be able to avoid fully for very long. But in terms of, just watched like the Microsoft Secure, it was event this week, and they launched Security Copilot. They've had GitHub Copilot, so that's like the programmer augmentation, your best buddy in programming. And I've actually heard almost largely very positive responses from programmers. It's
AI.
It's an AI co-pilot for programmers. But now we have one that they're, of course you have to be within like the Microsoft house for it all to work probably fully functionally, of course, right? But from what I saw, between doing security operations at one point and incident response at one point, and knowing some of the challenges there of just getting that right, I was really impressed. That particular tool set does a lot of what is hard about solving the Sudoku puzzle that is figuring out a case. So
we're talking diagnostic, like it's helping to diagnose what the issue is.
Yes.
Is it also helping to do the fix or do the cure?
Yes. So, I mean, part of it is, they have Microsoft Sentinel, which is kind of one of their larger just orchestration engines behind the scenes. Everyone uses it a little bit of a different way. But the notion is that if you have enough telemetry going into one place that's consistent enough in your environment that you can start relying on machine learning. And then as you have procedures come about that fix certain things, you start with low-hanging fruit, like, oh man, someone installed an extension on their browser that we don't want. For some groups, that's like a whole process. You have to engage them and walk them through, unclick this. If you end up having enough high-fidelity telemetry to take action on in an automatic way, that's just one less event that someone has to look at. That's one less email chain that someone has to do. And that allows you to focus on solving the harder cases or looking at the telemetry in your environment. You're more concerned
time
about.
save.
Yes. So it sort of helps, it not only helps dissect like the signal from the noise type stuff, but it actually walks you through a process of doing not only the investigation from the telemetry, being able to do some what I'll call dynamic carving. You really are kind of following breadcrumbs and trying to put together a picture. Sometimes it's a quick slam dunk and you get all four corners of your puzzle piece real fast. Other times it's a little more diffuse than that. And tools like this can really help you navigate like the wealth of logs and telemetry to put together the fragments of a digital transaction that happened that looks suspicious, whatever that was.
Yeah.
But it also actually helps you do something that I saw was one of the major pain points is it kind of helps build the case as you go and share it with other people in your security operations area while having like a cohesive forensic timeline.
That you're not having to write a report about or
I'm
whatever.
not having to copy, paste, and stitch together 5 different spreadsheets and keep up timelines on my notes and everything. And when you don't have those kinds of distractions, oftentimes certain scenarios take multiple hands on deck, right? It's think of it very much like emergency services. It's just that often these groups facilitate police, fire, and rescue to help them get back up, to recover. And some aftercare after a while to make sure everything's still good. And you want as many things there to help enable that in a friction-free way so you can focus on it and understand that not only have you addressed, I'll say, the obvious issue, quite often adversaries are getting into environments and then laterally moving. So
whack-a-mole.
You've got it when you say, it was 7 systems. There's got to be a certain level of confidence that all 7 systems were exactly not only the ones you were looking for, but the only ones you were looking for. And tool sets like Security Copilot help. It's like a suite that really just helps you go through a more relevant workflow without having to hop between like 8 different security tools. And that's a pretty nice future, at least from like a practitioner level.
Well, many levels.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's like I said, you have a co-pilot. I can easily see that, we're talking more and more about VR, AR stuff. We've had that in previous episodes. Please go back and take a look at it. And we were talking about, so you can have one of the devices on you all the time. And basically you have the co-pilot AI with you that records everything you say. Already today, when you do a Zoom meeting and you can't go to the Zoom meeting, there is an AI bot that goes in, records everything for you, and then in that recording, not only is it the voice recordings, but what people have put in the chat boxes on the side and all that kind of stuff. And out of that, when you come in after you've been on one meeting and your Eric AI chatbot has been on the other one, you just ask can you get the highlights and the most important things that was said and all that kind of stuff. And the AI will do all of those things for you, right? Now imagine, like you said, you're an EMT, right? You're out there, you're running around with that, and it's panic and everything's going on, but the AI will constantly record everything you do, and then by the end of the day, when you sit down, okay, let's just go through all of this and make make a list of the most important things. You don't have to sit and do that anymore because your AI is running with you. But that's another point. But because we were talking about security, obviously there are going to be security features in this. Are you going to have security AI bots that helps you with that, or how do we get there?
I think that's both the mystery, the fun, and the concern at the same time.
Yeah,
in a lot of ways. When they're talking about slowing things down. It's just that, when you have the genie out of the bottle, so to speak, you're not quite fully sure where the ceiling is of possible. Often that's a very good thing. But from a sake of we'll call it potential, there really is equal potential of good for society and equal potential of harm. And there's not a really great forecast of exactly what either one fully looks like just yet. And
I can say though, being this old as I am, I heard the same things when internet started up in the early 80s and 90s. There was oh, this is going to interrupt and it's going to take away all that jobs and all that kind of stuff, and it created millions of jobs instead.
I think, this is a difficult narrative to push because it's not really very sexy, but these are all just tools, right? And humans can use the tools to help humanity or to help themselves or whatever it ends up being. So that's the way that I really wish that things were kind of framed a lot more. But because it's particularly about this one, because you said something about AI that really struck me, which is because a lot of the time you can get a narrative through lots of different media outlets that is a fear. There's fear, right? It's fear about losing jobs. There's fear about losing industries. There's fear about just sort of losing that human touch and not being able to distinguish what was human made and what's been made by AI or whatever. But it's all still run by humans. You can unplug a machine out of the wall and kill it. It's not how at this point. I don't want to sound naive like we couldn't get there, but I do think it is important to always put the human back into the equation and be like, no, we have a lot of agency in what we can do with this if we think of it as a tool and not necessarily as our children's future is going to be this world.
Well, I've likened it a couple times to, when we whenever we came out with the Swiss Army knife, we didn't stop making single blade knives.
Yeah,
there you go.
That's true.
When we came out with the spork, as much sense as that makes, and we're so happy that KFC just ran with it.
I love that it's their primary utility.
We all still buy forks and spoons.
Yeah.
I would almost more identify as an artist since I was 12.
Yeah.
So as I've seen a number of these things, I'm so excited as an artist to see what I can do and where I can go, and I've already been leveraging it to help just enhance my process and my workflow, but without overtaking the original art I was making. Just take my original idea and go further, faster, and iterate on different notions of that idea versus how many times I could do it with a rough draft with pencil and then throw it away and then do a second one, and by then it's midnight.
Yeah. Yes.
So you get to ideify and you get to rethink, and a factor that you just couldn't do before, and it just takes a certain awareness of it and allowing it to either be augmented into your process or elevate your overall end product in some expedited way. Or, of course, there's a lot of very relevant conversation around AI and art. It's a thorny, prickly subject for very good reason.
Yeah.
But from someone who's gone through some of these technology transitions, there's part of me that also sees it as not a whole lot different than when we had Photoshop. And of course, the original artists were saying, no one's going to appreciate original art anymore. And now they can just do it digital and do it fast, and they're taking my job. And actually, what you see over time is, of course, there's some initial splash and churn. There's going to be some very valid, defined camps of use. And I've seen artists, even some artists I really look up to, say, absolutely not. I'm not a big fan of this. And then you have artists who are, hey, this is just giving me another lane other than my original art to go play around in. You know, and I think that's probably going to be some of the case regardless of what field you're in. And in this case, you know, unlike Photoshop, though, this has such a like a vast sphere of influence
and a creation element on its own.
Yes,
yeah, that
and where it goes from like production of anything, really. And I say production of anything because it's just that it helps you take a fragment of a thought, and then based off what you would ever go ask expertise for, or look up for yourself, or try to get some kind of conversational guidance, and it helps you move to that next step a lot faster, and then maybe restart again, and then.
Yeah. So you're using the AI to your advantage. One thing I want to say, and I can say this to the whole audience here, is that, you know, because there's people out there that are going to think, well, you know, AI is going to start taking over all the artworks and they're going to create artwork. You have to remember, AI is still going to have to do what you tell them. So the difference between a real artist, for instance, is that the artist will sit down and he starts drawing and out of everything, or let's say music, he sits there and the music comes in his head and write all of this down and eventually you will have a song, right? An AI, you need to input, you need to give him the information to do all of this. I can give an AI and say, hey, I want a country music and it's going to sound like Eminem and it's going to be in this beat or whatever it is. I still give it information and the AI will do that. And same thing with pictures. People are going crazy over Dali, right? Oh, it's a gray monkey on a white bicycle eating a banana flying over the moon. Well, yeah, it looks really, really cool, and all I can say is really, really well made. But someone had to input that, and human do that. The other thing I want to say about this is you always are going to have people that are going. I always say this, is like, there's a reason to why people don't buy tomatoes online, fresh tomatoes. It's because you want to go to the store, you want to pick that up and say, oh, I like this one. Or, you know, that's why you don't buy it online. It's the same thing with art or music or other things. It's a reason to why people want to go to museum and see real artists, or maybe buying a painting from someone. And that is my take. Sorry, I went on a rant there, but that is my feel about that.
Well, I think it reminds me of the Swiss Army knife comment. It's like we add things into our experience, but very rarely are they replacing things in our sort of real life experience. I mean, radio, people have been saying for decades that radio's dying, and like podcasts and satellites going to kill radio, and it just doesn't. It just adds more media.
Well, when email came along, they were like, we're never going to print anything again.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Now, I mean, there's some truth to certain elements of it that, you know, the other side of the coin is, of course, there's going to be production environments that would have normally hired an artist. So when they say some of it is a projection of the opportunity cost, right? It's the future roles where a very small shop of, we'll say, not inherently artistic, talented people who would have normally got this work done through other channels, and that's part of their world, right? You have an in-house graphic designer and that sort of thing. Not to say that, you know, those artists in that type of world can't start using some of these tools to their advantage. But from an artistic perspective, sometimes they're like, I don't want to. That's not what I do.
Exactly.
And then you're going to have companies going, yeah, but we can get everything you were going to make for us just faster. I'll have Kim back in produce come up and type something. She's really good at that. And that's where it becomes a skill set of having conversations with technology through these constantly developing interfaces. I mean, of course, right now it's typing into a roughly one line chat, you know, in a browser. Yeah. And then you get input, output, and that's the conversation. But very quickly seeing a number of other, we'll call it human compute interfaces coming up, where it's more voice oriented. So similar to like Star Trek Enterprise and talking to the computer and then having like a meaningful dialogue where they can just go with you on your problem solving. Co-pilot of sorts. Yeah. Right.
I mean, I think my brain immediately went to like Siri. Like, you have your phone, everybody's got their own phone, and you get your own person, you know, Siri's yours now, right? So, and then you go through certain exercises like you have to do for your thumbprint. You just go through these things to try to kind of set it up and what are your preferences and that kind of thing. And then it's your personal AI, which would be helpful, I think,
yeah,
to people.
yeah, absolutely. But here's a good example, though. Will you ever see AI sitting and having podcasts like this? Probably not. But will you see an AI being part of a podcast like this? That is very possible.
Oh, well, I'm sure you can hear. There's probably, if there's not already, there's going to be AI audio podcasts for sure. Like you could just listen and probably it's a human and a AI talking. Could be.
Well, I want to bring something else up. Privacy and data concerns and protections. That is something I think is really, really important. We're going back to security again. So bear with us. How all of this is data that's going to have to be saved and stored somewhere. Some of it is probably going to go away. Fortunately, today, compared to, if you go back 20, 30, 40 years ago, I remember in the days when there was like, you store things in case, right? And then it went to megabytes and gigabytes, and now, storage is cheap.
Yeah.
That's it. But even if storage is cheap, how do we secure it in such a way that, with privacy, for instance?
If you knew the answer, then you.
I have theories. But go ahead. I want to hear yours.
I mean, I think in general, there's been maybe a passive agreement that anyone who's grown up with the internet or saw it go from 56K dial up to where we are today. There's of course a bit of a volunteerism of sorts of an understanding that a lot of our personal data is kind of everywhere, right? It's leveraged through almost any service that we use now. So emails, phone numbers, what we call just PII, personally identifiable information, are there at a buffet level and probably has a historic archive if you've used like the same email and phone number for a long time.
Yeah.
Right.
God, that made me so nervous just thinking about that.
Right. Well, it is, when you say about privacy, like the ability for, I'll say just a digital ecosystem that have both passive scanning and then very targeted scanning, telemetry gathering tool sets. It's just security through obscurity just isn't a way as an individual or a small company to feel like all of your security needs are fine, we'll just say. And then how, of course, our data is being used in any respect behind the scenes, whether that's simply being packaged through behaviors, no personal identifiable information in it, but like your behaviors being packaged up and sold off as extra profit layer or far more. And then, of course, you have just the flaws, the systems that seem to be secure and all the controls appear to be in place and you feel like you have your own Siri or your own conversation going on with any AI interaction. And the assumption is that that's a private conversation. It is very difficult to tell if and when that's true when you're an individual user just sitting there. And especially with as many, when they were talking about slowing down, some of it is there is such a wide swath of tools coming up that people are automatically using and assuming are safe.
Right.
And there's quite a few, people with not the best intentions who are setting these things up, no different than you would plug in a malicious app in an app store to gather data.
That's true.
Yeah.
So,
but how do we go about to store this data then in a safe way? What do you think?
Well, I mean, there are absolutely what we'll call like confidential cloud is a talking point, basically cloud tech, but more at a confidential level, as opposed to shared tenant space where there's alleged digital firewalls and access control lists, making sure that nobody should be able to get into that stuff. But we find often that flaws happen, and then there's access. That's actually what happened to OpenAI recently, right? People could see other tabs. It's like, those bridges are actually there behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think some of it, I'm hopeful in the fact that I think some of the emerging technologies that are coming out are actually going to help isolate or contain or allow a certain sense of confidence that something's more private because it's in whatever it is a little bit more in your control, or it's on a technology platform that is just inherently more secure.
I
than
personally
others.
think blockchain. I mean,
There you go.
I'm
Yeah,
obviously
emerging tech.
I'm obviously coming from the blockchain space and being an avid blockchainer ever since the first Bitcoin and all that kind of stuff came up. So I know the security layers behind that, and I do know that, for instance, IPFS and stuff like that is very secure. And I can see us in the future storing our digital IDs and stuff like that, our medical records and things like that will go on blockchain. But also parts of things that we do in an AI environment. For instance, if I would have my co-pilot, my AI co-pilot, I can order that one and say, everything that you and I talk about right now in this phone conversation that I have, recorded and stored on my IPFS address, blob, right? Now that is secured. I mean, this is just speculations from my point of view, but coming from the blockchain space and now diving into AI, metaverse, et cetera, I do really think that blockchain is going to get more and more of the trusted part in this whole AI thing.
Yeah, I think as like the utility of it starts to prove itself beyond other fads. I've already seen. I'm following I forget the company right away, but it's a blockchain enabled health record company.
Yes,
for exactly what we're talking about.
Yep.
And a lot of those companies tend to move fast, and they don't always have the time or resources to focus on the security elements. And often, security is not seen as quite the asset that it can be up front. So, from the ideation process to early production or prototyping to then getting something out to market, some of the security elements tends to be just stuff that they've both, sort of inherit because they're on Azure or AWS cloud. And those natively have certain controls, but often the stuff that's a little more, granular data control and containerization, monitoring, reporting, alerting, all that kind of stuff is in some higher tiers of subscription services. So those aren't always in place.
Right.
No. True.
And that's again some of the speed at which some of these things are being stood up, even if they're hosted out of what we call trusted cloud providers. Whoever's setting that site up or that interface up with that AI extension, careful installing those.
Yeah, good thing that you mentioned that extensions is, and I think I want to explain that a little bit. So, ChatGPT or OpenAI are the people behind ChatGPT and GPT-4. And they just recently released and said, hey, we're going to release this so you can use this as an extra app or a tool in whatever you're doing. As a very good example of this is that I just recently saw how they implemented AI, for instance, in Blender.
Yeah.
So instead of sitting there in Blender and trying to figure everything out, and if I want to have a donut looks like this and it falls down and it's going to be this color, you can actually go in, use the AI, tell it what you want. It will go into Blender and create all those things. That's what we're talking about, extensions in these programs. And we're seeing that more and more and more now. We're seeing extension in like I told before, Zoom is using it, or you can use an app into Zoom or extension into Zoom. I think that we can go on for days about this, but just really quickly, before we end this, I want to just end on one question real quick. Do you think we can rely on AI?
Right now? Like today?
Yeah, what in the future, even in the future, what are your, as far as, because...
I mean, I feel like I have the authority to speak on it, the same as like my son. I don't know. I think that my concern is that its pace is so much quicker than what our pace is. That again, I hope that we kind of set the pace to us and not to it. If that's totally simplifying the situation, but I think you know what I mean. Good. And I hope that we use it for things other than blenders. I mean, good God, I can sit there. I know what I want my smoothie to look like. I need help with my taxes.
No, we're talking. Blender is a program that does animation. I'm sorry.
I thought you meant making a smoothie. I was like, who needs AI?
Well,
You run their
it will be.
blender.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
I told you I don't know very much about this.
But,
All right.
Real quick.
Intelligent answer.
Yeah.
No, it's fine. I think, when we're talking about like reliance, you have to look at reliance and dependency at the same time. And I want to be able to rely on the quality of conversation information I'm getting so I can make better decisions faster, no matter what that is, or produce something faster so I can mess it up and reproduce it again. There's also a side of the coin of like companies or people quickly injecting this stuff into their way of working and their way of life. And then no different than whenever Google Maps is down and you're in another town and you start having to ask for directions. Well, no one's used to anyone asking them for directions anymore either. So if everything has been automated in a way and the acting consensus is, well, so much of our life is automated, anytime that's not available or it's down or they hike price you again to have, it feels like we're going back into the cell phone minutes world of you only get so many tokens and transactions.
Yeah.
You better do it right.
Yeah.
So you better be really good at having a conversation with technology on the cheap. But there's some catches for sure.
Absolutely.
And especially from the security space. It'll be fascinating to see how the security industry takes advantage of this moment where we have this epoch change. And it's not exactly a level playing field, but it's becoming about as level as it's been in a long time.
Yep.
And I'm looking forward to seeing what like that industry and the creatives industry kind of comes up with as we go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, again, I think what we should do, we're going to come back. We're going to talk more about this. Meanwhile, thank you guys so much, and we will see you in the next episode. Bye.